Hello, Ramon. Hello, hello. What a wonderful start to the conference. And we are going strong now with Ramon, who's going to share a number of mentorship stories. I love your background there. Thank you. I like it. I like it too. I like sharing with people my happiness, my joy. Yeah, I'm the same way. Thank you for being with us today. Ramon is a relations developer engineer with Saboba, right? And from what I understand, you have been able to start working more with Rust and WebAssembly, which I believe has been one of the greatest um, parts of what you've been doing for the past couple of years. It has been a very interesting journey, and I have learned so much. Well, that's the whole idea. And Ramon is also a tech educator and a great mentor. His presentation is going to be uh, right on the spot. And I can say that he's one of the nicest, most loving people in tech, but I can't be impartial, unbiased, because he's my brother. And he has been a great mentor and a big part of my own journey in tech. So I am really excited to listen to your presentation. Go ahead, Ramon. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is, I'm so proud to be here. Thank you, people from RustFest. I hope you're enjoying a wonderful day. I thank you for joining me. And I want to share with you some of my experiences with mentorship. But before I do, I want to thank RustFest for having me here. And I want to reaffirm that condemnation of the atrocities and injustices that Putin is perpetrating in the Ukraine, and my support for everyone who's been affected. So let's start talking about mentorship. And dear friends, I have left a link for you, ramonh.dev/relatos de-mentoria.pdf. That will allow you to keep my slides on your screen as we go through the presentation. I have been so kindly introduced. My name is Ramon. My personal pronoun is he. And I have had the great honor and fortune of being part of wonderful communities. This is not my first RustFest. I have been coming to RustFest Globals during the pandemic. And I also had the great fortune to do a workshop in Barcelona in 2019, and it was so great. I had such a wonderful time. And as Pilar has just explained, I have been a coding mentor for years because this is a very important topic for me, not only for the people that you teach, but also for us as mentors. And I want to talk about that. But before I do, I would like to give you some background, telling you a little about my story. How did I get started as a developer, as a programmer? And I'm going to give you the short version. I started out in university. I was doing a software engineering degree at the Technological University in Vienna. And I was looking for a place to live with my girlfriend. And I was trying to find a job as an au pair, but we found a job that someone was offering, and it was in English, freelance Mac OS X developer. And you can see how long ago this was. The name was still Mac OS X. And I didn't feel that I would be able to do it. I had no experience, but my girlfriend motivated me and encouraged me. And I sent an email to this person who was looking for a freelance Mac OS X developer. I submitted my CV. He got back to me and he said, Ramon, thank you. Why don't we meet on Monday at the Mozart Cafe? And yes, it's the Mozart Cafe because we're in Vienna. Of course, that's what it had to be. And so we sat down and we were having a cup of coffee and we were talking. And it turns out that we went to the same high school. And this man, his name is Philip, said, Ramon, I need to ask you a question. I looked at your CV. It looks like you're a great guy, but you have no experience. Why did you apply? And I don't know, I was feeling somewhat lucky that day. I was feeling like self-confident. And I said, look, Philip, I feel like I can do this. I know I can learn quickly. I know I have a lot to learn. I got my first MacBook recently. I have been learning all about Xcode and all that. And I said, look, I think I have something to contribute. And Philip said, look, I, I thank you for that. I feel like you are a good guy. I like you. Let's do this. Do some email support work for me for a couple of months. Here's a book so you can learn to code for Mac OS X. And let's see how we do. I'm going to get you to do some bug fixes. And we started with that. And we'll start with that. And a couple of months later, I was doing that and I liked it. At the beginning of my career, I loved being able to come in and clean up the little issues, the little problems. I had a clear pathway and I said, well, I'm going to fix this and that. And it was wonderful. And I'm never going to forget how a couple of months later, Philip sent me an email that said, it was in English, and he said, highly satisfied with your work. He was really happy with the work I had been doing so far. And email, I'm never going to forget this email because it felt like one of the most important points in my career. Someone believed in me and said, Ramon, I like the work you do, and I think you can do even better and be even better. And so we continued to work. We are still working together today, to this day. And it took me a long time to realize that Philip really was always my mentor. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about mentorship. So we are starting with our presentation. So I have to give you an internet definition. So here it is. Mentorship is a personal growth relationship where a more experienced person, someone who knows more, helps someone else who is less experienced or who has less knowledge. So this is a relationship between two people. One who is more experienced helps the other person who's less experienced. And I'd also like to start out by saying that mentorship is, when you think of mentorship, I used to think that it was just a one-on-one in real life, talking about in person in an office. And I'd like to encourage everybody and say that this happens everywhere. For example, here's a picture of a GitHub screenshot from 2018, a poll that I did for the Summer Code project that was a project to help underrepresented people to start making open source contributions. And so I put in my request, and you can see at the bottom that Claprat wrote to me and said it's super solid and gave me a few comments to improve my code. And that kind of feedback helped me be a better developer. But it's not only online, but it also happens offline. For example, here's a picture that is a few years old. This is a workshop that we had in Vienna to learn Flash programming. Flash is a Python framework that is for web servers. And what I want to say here also is that mentorship is not only one-on-one, isolated, but it's also in a dynamic of apprentices and mentors, mentees and mentors who switch connections all day long. Mentees help one another. Everyone is learning. And with this happens not only among adults, but mentorship also happens between adults and younger people. This picture here, and I got permission to share this, is a picture of an activity. It's an after-school activity that my wife and I did where we teach younger kids how to code. And this is computer game programming. So what we did was teach them how to code. We teach them how to make games. We teach them how to understand the logics of a computer, how a computer works. And so it's not only in some parts of the world. Like I said, it was online, but it happens throughout the world. What you're seeing here, and I'm sharing this again with permission, these are people from different parts of the world. For example, we have Girls in Code. That's the the project that I mentioned earlier for underrepresented people to make free source, open source contributions. This is a picture of the group in Medellin in Colombia. And in the lower part of the screen, you see a group in Delhi in India, everywhere in the world where we were contributing and helping them get started in this career. And it's not only mentorship in tech. Mentorship in tech doesn't only have to do with programming or coding. What you see here, this is a picture that is called Plural Diversity CFP Day. So it's a call for proposal day for technical conferences where you are motivating, encouraging people who are underrepresented to be ready to speak publicly like I am doing today. So I was talking about how to handle nervousness during speaking. By the way, I'm nervous right now. Everybody, we all get nervous all the time. But we're talking about that. So let's talk a little about the motivation to be a mentor, because everybody knows this. Being a mentor is a big responsibility. And here, I would like to show you a little of what my friend Geddes said in the Mentorship Guidebook, his book, one of the most wonderful things that I have read. First off, mentoring helps others in their careers, in their education. It helps them with imposter syndrome, which we're going to talk about in a little while. We help them with their projects, but being a mentor also helps the mentor. It helps you learn more about yourself. It expands your point of view. It helps you create new connections, new social relationships. It helps us give back positive things to the communities. It helps us find gaps in our own knowledge. And we always learn something new when we try to explain things. And as a community, it helps everybody. It encourages us to be inclusive, to help contribute, to include others. And it's this domino effect. When you mentor someone, you're not only mentoring to be a public speaker or a developer, but you also mentor them on how to be a mentor. And that is very important because after that, that person will become a mentor to someone else. So it's like you are inheriting that from the various relationships that you have. So let's make a difference here between teaching and mentoring, because I think there is a difference there that I would like to point out. When I think about teaching, I always think about knowledge that is guided and it follows a path from the teacher to the students. But I believe that mentorship has a bi-directional flow of knowledge between the mentor and the mentee, because one teaches the other one. And so I'm going to share with you some of the things that I have learned over the years to be a mentor and encourage you to start mentoring, or if you haven't done it in a while, start doing it again, or have a conversation of how to improve mentorship for people in our communities. And so to start with a mentor-mentee relationship, I would love to first talk about the importance when you first get started, when a mentee comes to you and being able to say, let's sit down and let's discuss what your goals are. Because nobody knows better than oneself what one needs. And so giving the mentee the opportunity to say, well, I want to be a developer and I want to do this and that, and I would love to start giving talks, being a public speaker. And so being able to state those goals, after that, things evolve. And so it's not only going to be the first question, but it's a question that I believe has to be asked very often and say, well, look, we have been doing mentorship for a couple of months now. How are you feeling? How have things changed for you? And I think that has a part of empathy that is really important. And that is one of the many positive habits that I think we have to encourage as mentors, because mentorship is not something that happens only once. Let's say that I have a mentor-mentee relationship with someone. We get together for 30 minutes and we never talk to one another again. That has a long-term effect. it's long lasting. So let's talk about empathy. Being able, once you're a mentor, you express that empathy for your mentee and you say, look, I know several of the issues that you come across when you first become a developer or when you first become a speaker or anything that is related to our communities. And being able to say that is also encouragement as a good habit for people in tech communities. And as a developer, as someone who is a developer, a programmer, you have to be good at communication, because one of the most important skills of a developer is that efficient, effective communication. Of course, it's important to be able to write the code but to be able to use that code to say what it does when you do code reviews. It's very important in order to say, these are my ideas and this is why I have put them down like this. And so when communicating, especially when you find something that maybe you don't agree with or maybe you don't understand, let's talk about the importance of asking questions as a mentee and also as a mentor, and asking those questions in a demanding way, in a specific way. And when I say demanding, I'm not saying question, 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 question. No. What I mean is a question that demands a thinking that unlocks both the mentee and the mentor. Let me show you an example of a question that I get often when I'm mentoring people. What is the main programming language that I need to learn if I want to develop web software? And I'm sure you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. If you have mentored before, you start thinking. There's the temptation of giving the most irritating, I would say, answer for a mentee, which is, well, it depends. And so I like encouraging the mentee to change that question a little and say, for example, what is the first programming language that I should learn if I want to develop web software? That's better, but still it can be fixed even further. The question can be honed in further, and it can take us into a way of thinking of how we can help the mentee understand better how we find that path that is not optimal, because there is no optimal path in learning. There are different paths that we need to walk. And so, for example, how can we hone this further? What is a good programming language to learn first if I want to develop software for the web? And so you can start saying, well, I can give you something that worked for me. And that is an important part, what worked for you. I think that's one of the important things that we have to do as mentors. We have to expose instead of impose. People who are developers have our own opinions, and we have these very strong opinions. I like this, and this is the best software to do this or that. And I'm sure that many of us have developed those opinions over our years of experience, but that was after being exposed to a number of options that worked best in that time, and that we have been able to evolve and learn what works best for us today. So we have, for example, the option of editors. I love them, but there are other options that I always present to my mentees. VS Code is one of the editors that most people use, but there's also Emacs and Sublime Text. And there are many other options that we can present to our mentees and say, look, these are the options available to you, and these are tools that work for specific contexts. And the same thing happens with programming languages. I know that this is a Rust conference, but just by the same token, we could present JavaScript, TypeScript, Rust, Python, everything that we know that works best for the various contexts where we need to apply them. And the same thing happens with codes, the coding styles. What line do we put the brackets in, for example, or the get history styles, conventional or doing merge commits, conventional commits or merge commits or reformers, all of that. So presenting and helping the kids understand the advantages and disadvantages of the various styles so that we can support our mentees. Now, let's go back to something that I said earlier, imposter syndrome. I say it with very freely that I suffer from imposter syndrome even today. If you know what it is, it's a concept where people who start as a developer or starts doing something else, we start losing our confidence in ourselves, and we say, am I really a programmer? What am I doing here? It happens to several people, and it happens to many people even to this day. It happens to me to this day. But I have developed tools that I use to be able to fight imposter syndrome and to be able to work for something that works better for me in new contexts. I started into developer relations last year, and my tools weren't working so well because it was a new context. So understanding that someone who is a mentee is going to go through the same stages, that's important, with the responsibility of saying, look, when I give you this advice, please know that this is my own perspective. It comes from my own context, and helping them understand that what works for one person, what worked 10 years ago, please keep in mind that maybe it will work differently today, because one loses that perspective over the years. Let us talk about how important it is to provide constructive feedback. I hope it has never happened to you, or hasn't happened to many of you, that you have gotten very negative feedback, that you open a pull request and you say, I'm going to close it immediately, this is terrible. Or they say, please go back and rewrite the whole thing. And the damage that causes to your motivation, to your soul, it's soul crushing to say that. And that's where many of the symptoms of the imposter syndrome come from. I want to give you a piece of advice of how I give feedback on something that maybe I see it and I say, well, there is a better way to do this. And I found the right term. I didn't know what it was before, and it is asking guided questions. If you're not familiar with the term, a guided question would be a question that encourages you and the mentee to have a thinking and a discussion that has critical aspects where you want to unlock a discussion. I'll give you an example. And let me tell you that A, this is my only slide in this presentation that has code on it, and B, it's not Rust. I apologize for that. So here it is. We have a piece of embedded Ruby with HTML where a mentee came to me and said, how can I show the number of the week in the calendar? And so we have a string here that says date on week, and then we add a space, and then the number of the week, the first day in a date range. So I knew this is not going to work. I see the issues there, but when I went back to give feedback to my mentee, I said, well, let's think about it. What happens if we try to translate to a language where a language where the number of the week is in the middle of the phrase, of the statement? What happens there? And I'm going to be honest. I've been thinking for over a year, and I can't think of any examples of languages where that happens, but it doesn't matter what happens if that happens in any language. If you know of any, please let me know. So from there, the mentee said, yes, you're right. And we can start discussing and looking at the documentation. And we found a solution. We went and looked at the internationalization library, Ruby library, and we found that there is a way of passing through the variable to that translation string so that when you're writing the string, you can impose the number of the date. And that was something that we did together, collaborating. And that has a feeling, this goes back to empathy. It gives you this feeling of pride for you and for the mentee to be able to show how you get to these answers. As programmers, most of what we do is we fix problems. And talking about problems, let's talk about how important it is as someone who is a member of a community, how important it is to increase help and reduce damage. As a white man, I have to acknowledge, and I have an article that is in English that was written by Will Larson that said mentorship is a privilege, how important it is to dedicate time to understand my position of privilege and understanding that when someone asks me a question where I'm facing the opportunity to give advice about an area where I'm not experienced, how important it is to acknowledge that and not give or assume and generalize and say, well, things are like this. How important it is to really have the context of the experiences of other people and using our network to expand those voices. That's really important. And it's a big responsibility that we have as mentors. How important it is to be attentive, to be open. When I mentor other people, I love to say, think of me as a rubber ducky that you have access to at any time. If you don't know what a rubber ducky programming is, then it's being able to explain to someone with the easiest, simplest words that we know what the problem is, and being able to unlock knowledge and say, oh, yes, that's how it's done. I'm sure it has happened to all of us that we are talking to a mentee where they start explaining a solution to a problem and we immediately say, no, that's wrong. We think, no, that's wrong. And we fall into the temptation of saying, well, I should interrupt them. It has happened to us, but I want to say how important it is to give the opportunity to the mentee to finish talking and get to the end of their thought. Even if you are 100% in disagreement, because one of two things will happen. Either the mentee realizes that as they are stating it, it is not the right solution, and they start rethinking the situation with the guided questions to get to a better solution. Or maybe we as mentors realize, wait, you know what? That's right. And one learns with that. And with that, I want to say how important it is in a mentorship relationship, how important it is to do cooperative learning. As I said before, when I was talking about reducing the damage, how important it is to avoid giving advice in topics where we don't know much or when we know less. It has happened that sometimes people ask a question, we don't know the answer, and we sort of give an answer that sounds about right. And we say, no, that doesn't matter because that's just the way it is. I have learned one of my favorite tools when I'm mentoring someone is a phrase that was taught to me, which is, well, you know what? I have no idea. Let's find out. And I'm going to give you a story of something that happened to me several years ago when we were doing that activity of teaching children how to code. And I will give you an example. What you're seeing here in this awful graphic, I apologize. I'm not really good at graphics, at graphic design. What I'm showing is we were doing a two-dimensional game with the kids. Here you see a window, and we were telling kids, here you draw the coordinates, and this is how we can manage the position of the character. Here you move him to the top when it's 0, 0. It's in the upper left corner when the coordinates are 0, 0. And I remember the one kid interrupted and said, wait, I'm learning math. And I was taught that when coordinates are 0, 0, it's the lower left corner. Why is it different here? And I was stressed out and I thought, no, you know what? I have no idea. Let's find out. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to summarize. But what we learned was that TVs and older TVs and screens, what they did is that they rendered images like this from top to bottom, left to right. I'll give you an example. This is an animated slide as a warning. So what you're seeing here, this is a TV set that was recorded, I believe, at 10,000 frames per second of Super Mario Brothers in an SRT TV. And you can see how it's being drawn little by little. I find that wonderful. and how important it is to start that kind of finding things out and showing to the mentee how we solve our problems. One of my favorite questions that I have gotten from these workshops that are for underrepresented people, the question was, why does the HTML element, why is it called div? And I laughed because I thought, how come I've never asked myself that? And we learned it. And by the way, if you don't know what it is, it's because it's a division. And using those guided questions to be able to show the mentee how we are learning things, and to show to the mentee what tools we have available to us to solve the problems that we come across. And something that I really love in doing code live streaming is being able to say verbally how I'm solving the problems and say, I'm going to do this here, I'm going to do this there. And with that, one of my main goals as a mentor is to demystify the magic. Because when you start coding, many of the things that we learn sound like magic. How do HTTP requests work? How do compilers work? And so taking the time with the mentee to say, well, look, is this a good time to look further into the topic? And so, for example, drawing. And again, I apologize, I'm really bad at drawing. But we take a piece of paper and we say, look, this is a client, this is a server, this is how they connect, this is a request and a response. And then we show them the games that we have. For example, Regex Crossword, a wonderful tool to learn regular expressions, or CSS Diner to learn about CSS selectors, or Flexbox Froggy, one of my favorite ones, which is a game to start learning Flexbox. And so that kind of thing. I also want to say how important it is when you are starting to code, how important it is to understand the perspective of a newbie. I have been doing this for several years, so I tend to forget the parts where you get confused at the beginning, where you get stuck. And having in mind how important it is to have that perspective of a newbie. And I beg of you, if you want to do it, but you don't feel like you're able to do it yet, start exploring mentorship, because that's a really important experience. And also mentorship for a higher level is just as important. As a senior, I can ask a newer programmer who knows a lot about graphic programming. I don't know anything about graphic programming with the vector algebra. I don't know anything about that. And so I could start to learn. I don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to speed up a little. I want to know how important it is to know your limits. I'm really excited to do mentorship, but it's important to know that if I take too many mentees, the quality of a mentorship suffers. I have a finite amount of energy, so you have to take care of yourself. Self-care is important. Know your limits, manage it well. So I'm ready to finish. If you're excited and you're thinking, how can I get started as a mentor? I have a couple of suggestions. One, look for local events and communities. There's Bean Coder Dojo, the Rails Girls workshops, RustBridge. I went to one in Paris and it was so great, offering tech career advice for free. I do this often. It was an idea of my dear friend Jessica, who said, get online and offer half an hour of talking on Zoom and listen to people and give them suggestions about how they can continue their career. By the way, I do that today for Spanish speakers. If you want to talk about your career, please get in touch. I have a tweet here. If you have an open source project, tag your issues. It's really easy to say, this is a great first issue for newbies, and then offer mentorship off of that. If you have a full-time job, maybe see if that job has an internal mentorship program. And if it doesn't, if you're able to do it, suggest that it be created. Practice communities. We have one that is called Study Jams, where every 2 weeks we meet and talk about anything that has to do with coding. We meet online because of the pandemic, and we learn all kinds of things. put your stuff online. There is a concept that became very popular a couple of years ago that is called digital gardening, where you go and you put all of your knowledge online, like a blog, videos, live streaming, whatever you want to do. And I would like to suggest my book, this book written by Nadia Ekbal. I will leave you the link, Working in Public. It's in English and it is wonderful. And with all of that, I want to add to the definition of mentorship, because mentorship is not only about sharing knowledge. In my opinion, it's also about sharing the joy of sharing knowledge. So thank you very much for your patience, for listening to me. Here you have all the links. I also have a tweet that went out. There's my Twitter handle, Hola Soy Milk. You can find me there. And so you'll find everything there. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful RustFest. Thank you so much, Ramon. We can tell how passionate you are about it. I imagine you could keep talking about that for hours. Yes, we could be here until tomorrow. Could you do me a big favor and could you tweet? I'm sure you must have old tweets, but can you retweet the resources and the links? And we will share them so that people can find all the information. I would appreciate it because I think this is a very important topic, particularly for the community, for us to continue to share and to grow together. Thank you. Yes, I will. That's a good idea. Thank you. And thank you all. Thank you for being here. It was great. See you.